All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, all of us knew the media was going to give Joe Biden a pass, but the starkness with which it is becoming clear just how much one they're going to give is truly remarkable. It all played out before us on Monday, late evening, when Joe Biden addressed the country after the Electoral College officially declared him the victor of the 2020 presidential election. And at the end of his speech, Fox News' Peter Doocy shouted a question to him, asking when he learned his son Hunter Biden was under federal investigation. Let's take a listen.
Thanks for the congratulations. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, none of what you just saw should be surprising. It's basically the conduct of journalists over the last 4 years of Trump. He finishes speaking, they bellow questions, sometimes he takes them, sometimes he dismisses them, just like Biden did. That's not the problem. What really caught my eye was this. Journalist Jeff Bennett at MSNBC tweeting out the interaction, essentially mocking Fox News reporter Peter Doocy for asking a question. And here's the crazy thing. I served in the White House press corps with Jeff, many of the White House reporters and journalists who liked that tweet. And I've sat right there on the photo line with all of them while we bellowed questions at Trump trying to get him to answer. And here's the thing. There was nothing wrong with that. We were doing our jobs. But it is so incredibly telling that Joe Biden is getting praised here by a White House reporter for a pretty dumb retort to a perfectly legitimate question. And it speaks absolute volumes to the conduct of the press that we expect to see in the coming years. Peter Doocy was asking a perfectly legitimate question of Joe Biden. It's a type of question that the press bellowed at Trump many times in his presidency. I was there. About Michael Cohen, Roger Stone, Stormy Daniels, Robert Mueller. There's too many different things to count. It's behavior I actually support. The President of the United States should always be treated with a little bit of disdain and press by members of the press. But something I knew when I covered the White House, and what we all know now to be absolutely true, is that this behavior is selective, and that a good journalism instinct apparently dies with Joe Biden. This little incident in a nutshell tells you everything you need to know. Pressing Biden on tough subjects is over. Even daring to ask him a question is too much. When the Biden team goes out of its way to quash tough questions like the Trump team did in many cases, don't expect the press to speak up. I already know this. Just a few days ago, once again, Fox News reporter Griff Jenkins asked Dr. Jill Biden about her reaction to the news that Hunter Biden is under investigation. And the Biden press wranglers immediately stepped in, shooed away the reporters, stepped in front of the cameras so that she wasn't required to answer. I'm serious. Take a look.
Yeah, I've already talked to him.
Dr. Biden, one thing on the reaction to the news of the investigation of your son Hunter.
Let's go.
Thank you all. Come on.
Not one word of protest from the traveling press corps. From the press, no one. They are allowed to get away with it because they're Democrats, plain and simple. And the closer you look at this story, the more you see the makings of an obvious political scandal that the media dropped the ball on from the very beginning. The icing on the cake came in recent days when NBC News reported they had uncovered emails showing that Hunter Biden was told he did not disclose $400,000 in income on his 2014 tax returns that he received from Burisma, the Ukrainian energy company. Take a look at how they covered it during the entire impeachment scandal. I know ancient history, but only about a year ago, here's what NBC wrote at the time. Quote, "There's no evidence for Trump's Biden-Ukraine accusations." Oh, really? In the second paragraph of that story, quote, they write, quote, "Despite Trump's continued claims, there's no evidence of wrongdoing on the part of either Biden." Well, now we know two things. One, there's actually enough evidence that the Department of Justice has been looking at this since 2018, before that story was filed, and that the evidence they need was reported just now by their very own outlet. The evidence has always been there. Been talking about it here on this show since July 2019, when Peter Schweitzer was the first to uncover all of this. But nobody wanted to do the real digging. Nobody wanted to dedicate millions of dollars in resources to reporting on Joe Biden. They were too busy digging through the Trump Foundation's trash to match up receipts. And once again, I actually support that type of journalism. But it's ridiculous and disgusting to see it only applied in one-way direction. The Hunter Biden story isn't the most important one in the world. I, for example, care a lot more about stimulus checks, ending the war in Afghanistan, retaking our economy from the Chinese government. But it's a litmus test for our media on whether they'll even pretend to care about the issues that animated them for the last 4 years, and whether they're going to continue their aggressive approach to the commander-in-chief. Instead, media is going back to sleep, just like Biden promised. Unfortunately, that means conduct like this, or whatever the next scandal is, will be brushed under the rug and treated as, well, it's not as bad as Trump, so let's just give him a pass. The Biden people can treat them with the utmost contempt, and they won't fight back, because they're so obsessed with being beloved by them. But the one thing that they can't change is us. We were all just subjected to 4 years of their insanity and hypocrisy and double standards. We are not just going to roll over as fast as they are and accept their new conduct after they so starkly changed their behavior in the last several years. And worst of all for the mainstream media, they broke decorum rules forever at the White House. And that's a good thing. They wrote the playbook for now conservative outlets like Fox to menace the incoming commander-in-chief. So even though I know that the press will vilify Fox and others for being aggressive against Biden, all I can say is game on. And it's amazing, Crystal, that clip with Dr. Jill Biden. Whenever Griff Jenkins is yelling out a question, they jump right in front of those cameras and shove them off. And I can't tell you how many CNN segments I've watched where they talk about the Trump wranglers doing the same thing. And I remember being in those rooms, and it was pretty annoying and outrageous. And I thought it was a good thing to call that out. Be like, hey, you shouldn't treat people that way. But they're doing the same thing, not one word of protest. Same thing with shouting a question at Biden about his son being under investigation, and they're like mocking him and then praising Biden for giving like some retort like that. Again, saw all of that behavior firsthand at the White House. I think it's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
And it's just going to disappear. He's the only one that shouted, the only single person who shouted a question at Joe Biden. In a Trump presser, you can't even hear over each other as you're all bellowing questions at him. I've seen, like I said, I've participated in it. It's just, it's crazy to watch them just sit there.
I'm just surprised they weren't all yelling at him like, what does it feel like to have saved the world?
Yeah.
What does it feel like?
That's what's going to happen.
That is,
yeah.
I mean, I will never forget that interview. I'm sure you all remember. We played it here so many times. Nicole Wallace and Joe Biden when he's the Democratic front runner, and she's like fawning over him like he's, you know, somebody's daughter and grandpa rather than potential future president. The media has protected this guy every single step of the way. Remember back in the Democratic primary, anytime anyone said anything remote, like not even negative about him, like not nasty or personal, but like, hey, this record, not so great. They'd be like, how could you? Yeah. This disunity, this division, this divisive rhetoric, you should be ashamed of yourself. I mean, from the beginning, and the thing that was always the third rail was talking about Biden family corruption at all. And why? Because it was directly tied into Trump and impeachment and Ukraine and all of this. So it created this extra pressure that they felt, at least, on the media to not give the Trump talking points 1 inch. Like they couldn't give them any little sliver of credence, rather than pointing out like, okay, here's what really happened. Here's what was legal. Here's what could potentially be illegal. Here's where the facts lead. No, they had to say blanket statement, nothing to see here. This is all made up. It's been debunked. Every single story would go to these great lengths to say like Trump alleges, but this has been widely debunked, et cetera, without evidence. Exactly. And so the question was always, I mean, it wasn't really a question, but there's a little bit of a question of like, okay, well, once he's president, or at least once he's president-elect, once he's president, is that behavior going to change? Are they going to finally like ask him some tough questions, demand some answers about his plans for the country and why he's got this random mishmash of people that he's put into his cabinet, many of whom have no expertise for the jobs they've been slotted into? We now know 100% the answer. If you were holding out any hope, they will absolutely not do any of that. And essentially at this point, look, Fox has long been an arm of the RNC.
Yes.
Like that was conceived from the founding. Like Roger Ailes intentionally created Fox as like a political machine for the Republican Party. MSNBC sort of came into its left-leaning posture by accident. Yeah, they were kind of trying to do like, we're going to be our version of CNN, and then Keith Olbermann takes off, and then they just kind of recreated that. And that, so they weren't started intentionally as like, we're going to be an arm of the Democratic Party, but that is certainly what they are now, and CNN is that as well. So if you say anything that can be construed as like damaging to the team, then you know, that's not acceptable, essentially.
What I'm really excited for is this, which is that now that they broke all of the traditional decorum rules under Trump, they can't actually criticize Fox for yelling questions. So a lot of people don't remember this. My old outlet, the Daily Caller, there was a White House reporter there who yelled at President Obama during a press conference. And they almost kicked him out of the White House press corps. Like, they censored him, and Jay Carney said some really mean things to Tucker Carlson, who was then the editor over there, and it was a scandal. I mean, it was a legitimate media scandal. Yeah, good luck. You're going to try and Fox. You can't censor Peter Doocy now. You can't do it. And so now they've opened the door, and I was in the briefing room for a lot of those shenanigans, and I know they're not going to continue it, but now it's Fox's turn, right?
Yeah.
And so the Biden administration is going to try and do what the Obama administration do, like declare war on Fox and all of that, but you can't ban somebody from the briefing room.
Yeah.
And so we're going to see a total inversion where right-wing media are going to be like the most, like dogged journalists. The left-wing journalists are going to be with the right-wing one and make fun of them for shouting questions. But the truth is that it was always acceptable, and that nobody should really be making fun of others for asking real questions to whoever the commander-in-chief is. It's just amazing because in this portion, the large majority of the American press corps is not asking questions, is making fun of people for asking them after spending 4 years doing exactly that.
The press is supposed to be hostile.
Yes.
Like, you're supposed to be adversarial. That is like the whole thing. But all too often, it's only when it's convenient for your team that you actually press and ask the tough questions.
All right, we're going to have more Rising for everybody right after this.